He called me a useless parasite in fluent Japanese, smiling as if paying me a compliment. He assumed my worn hoodie meant ignorance, but he did not know two things. First, my clothes cost more than his suit. Second, the expert his billionaire parents flew halfway around the world to hire is me. Tonight, I will not just teach him a language lesson, I will teach him how to spell regret in blood and tears. My name is Linda Stratton, and to the visible world, I am nothing more than a background character in the vibrant, chaotic movie that is New York City. I sat at a rusted metal table outside a cafe in the Lower East Side, the kind of place where the espresso tastes like burnt rubber and the pigeons are aggressive enough to mug you for a croissant. My fingers moved rhythmically across the keyboard of a laptop that looked like it had survived a tactical drop from a helicopter in the early 2000s. The casing was scratched, the screen flickered if you tilted it past 90 degrees, and the sticker on the lid was peeling away to reveal the gray plastic beneath. Passers-by glanced at me and saw a woman in her early 30s with messy blonde hair, tied back in a loose bun, wearing a gray hoodie that had seen better days, and jeans that were fraying at the hem. They saw a freelancer struggling to make rent, or perhaps a grad student writing a dissertation that would never be published. They looked right through me, their eyes sliding off my silhouette like rain off a windowpane. That is exactly how I like it. On the screen of that decrepit machine, however, a secure terminal was processing the final authorization for a hostile takeover of a logistics firm based in Dubai. The transaction was worth $2.4 billion. With a final tap of the Enter key, I routed the capital through 3 shell corporations in the Cayman Islands, finalizing the merger for a client who would never know my face, only my pseudonym. The fee for my morning's work dropped into my offshore account. It was enough to buy this entire block of Manhattan, but I simply closed the laptop, took a sip of the terrible coffee, and exhaled. Being invisible is not a tragedy, it is a superpower. In my line of work, anonymity is the only shield that holds up against the kind of enemies I make. I am a crisis negotiator, a fixer for the corporate elite, a ghost who cleans up the messes that threaten to topple empires. But to my family, specifically my younger sister Chloe, I am just Linda, poor, struggling, unambitious Linda. My phone buzzed on the table. The screen lit up with Chloe's name. I swiped to answer, softening my expression even though she could not see me. "Hey, Chloe," I said, my voice shifting from professional coldness to the warmth I reserved only for her. "He did it, Linda. He finally did it." Chloe's voice was high, breathless, and vibrating with an excitement that made me wince slightly. "Brad proposed. Look at the picture I just sent you." My phone buzzed again. An image loaded. It showed a manicured hand sporting a diamond ring that was aggressive in its size. It looked heavy, gaudy, and entirely too expensive for a branch manager's salary. "It is substantial," I said, choosing my words carefully. "Congratulations, sweetie. I will be happy if you are happy." "I am over the moon," she squealed. "But listen, that is not even the biggest news. His parents are coming. Mr. and Mrs. Tanaka are flying in from Tokyo next week. They want to meet the family. They want to meet you." My stomach tightened. I knew about the Tanaka family. Everyone in the business world knew about Tanaka Heavy Industries. They were old money, the kind of industrial royalty that dated back to the Meiji Restoration. They valued honor, discretion, and tradition. How they had produced a son like Brad was a genetic mystery I had yet to solve. "Linda." Chloe's voice dropped an octave, losing its celebratory sparkle. "You will come to the dinner, right, please. It is at the Glass Obsidian." I sighed, rubbing the bridge of my nose. "Chloe, you know how Brad gets when I'm around. We do not exactly mesh." I know, she pleaded. "But this is his parents. It is huge for him. He is so stressed about the audit reports at work, and he just wants everything to be perfect. Please, for me and Linda. Could you maybe dress up, like really dress up? Brad is worried about impressions." There it was, the sting. It was not malicious coming from Chloe, but it was a direct echo of Brad's voice in her head. "I will be there," I promised, forcing a lightness I did not feel. I will wear something that does not have a hood. I promise. Thank you, I love you, she shouted before hanging up. I stared at the black screen of my phone. The joy in her voice terrified me. Chloe was 24, soft-hearted, and dangerously naive. She saw the world in pastels, whereas I saw it in binary codes of leverage and liability. She saw Brad Tanaka as a charming, successful prince who bridged two cultures. I saw him for what he was. My mind drifted back to a barbecue 3 months ago. It was the 4th of July. Brad had stood on the patio of the Hamptons rental he claimed to own. I had checked the deed. It was a short-term lease holding a craft beer and holding court with Chloe's friends. I remembered the way he looked at me when I pulled up in my 10-year-old Honda Civic. He had smirked, a subtle twisting of his lips that did not reach his eyes. "Linda," he had said, his voice dripping with faux concern. "That engine sounds like it is dying of tuberculosis. You know, in Japan. We have strict inspections to keep junk like that off the road. It is about respect for public space. But I guess here in America, people just do not care about standards." He loved to do that. He loved to weaponize his heritage to belittle everyone around him. Despite having grown up in Connecticut, he played the role of the sophisticated, exotic aristocrat, treating American culture, the very culture that raised him, as something vulgar and beneath him. Later that same day, he had cornered me in the kitchen. "You are still living in that apartment on 4th Street, he asked, leaning against the granite counter, blocking my exit. "It is home," I replied shortly. "It is a shoebox," he laughed. "I do not know how you do it, renting your whole life, throwing money into a black hole. My father taught me that land is the only real power. That is why the Tanakas own blocks of Tokyo. But I guess not everyone has that instinct." I had bitten my tongue so hard I tasted iron. I did not tell him that I did not pay rent. I did not tell him that I had bought the building 5 years ago through a holding company to prevent it from being demolished by developers. I did not tell him that the shoebox he mocked was sitting on top of a property portfolio worth $40 million. I let him believe I was the poor, struggling sister because it made him feel big. And a man who feels big makes mistakes. But now, the stakes have changed. He was marrying Chloe, and Chloe had just inherited $200,000 from our grandmother. It was not a fortune to the Tanakas, but to a desperate man living beyond his means. It was a lifeline, and Brad was desperate. I could smell it on him like cheap cologne. I packed up my laptop and stood up. The city noise washed over me: sirens, jackhammers, the dull roar of millions of people chasing dreams. I walked 5 blocks to a nondescript office building with no signage. I took the elevator to the 22nd floor. The doors opened to a lobby of polished concrete and frosted glass. There was no receptionist, only a biometric scanner. I pressed my palm against the panel. The light turned green, and the heavy doors hissed open. This was Silent Horizon. It was a boutique strategic consulting firm in name, but in reality, it was a private intelligence and crisis management agency. We did not advertise. Our clients found us when they had run out of other options. I walked past the rows of empty desks. Most of our analysts worked remotely from secure locations, and entered my office at the corner. It was sparse, soundproofed, and cold. I sat down at my desk, which held 3 monitors and a secure hardline phone. "Good morning, Linda," a voice came through the intercom. It was Marcus, the firm's director and the only person who knew my full history. "I have a new file for you. It just came in via encrypted courier. Priority 1. "Send it through," I said, waking up my system. A digital file appeared on my center screen. The logo at the top was a stylized red sun rising over a steel gear. Tanaka Heavy Industries. My heart skipped a beat, then settled into a slow, predatory rhythm. I opened the dossier. The summary was brutal. The conglomerate was facing a liquidity crisis. Their stock had dipped 12% in the last quarter, but the bleeding was not coming from their shipyards in Osaka or their electronics division in Seoul. The hemorrhage was localized. The source of the financial rot was the North American division. I scrolled down. The forensic accounting report was preliminary but damning. Millions of dollars were vanishing into vendor accounts that had no physical addresses. Inventory was being written off as damaged at rates that were statistically impossible. I looked at the name of the Director of North American Operations, Bradley K. Tanaka. I leaned back in my chair, the leather creaking softly. It all made sense. The flashiness, the desperate need to impress, the rush to marry Chloe just as her inheritance cleared probate. Brad was not just a snob, he was a thief. He was stealing from his own family, cannibalizing the legacy he bragged about so incessantly, likely to cover bad bets or a lifestyle he could not sustain. And now, his parents are coming, not for a vacation, not just to meet the in-laws. They were coming to inspect the books. Brad needed a shield. He needed a distraction. Or maybe he needed Chloe's money to plug the hole before the auditors arrived. I looked at the specific request from the client, Esther. Tanaka Sr. He was looking for an external auditor, someone ruthless and unbiased, to come in and find the cancer in his American branch. He wanted someone who could operate in the shadows, someone who could not be bought or intimidated. Marcus came over the intercom again. The client is desperate. Linda. They suspect internal theft by high-level management. They want our best. They specifically asked for the auditor. The auditor. That was the name they gave me after I dismantled a corrupt board of directors in Chicago 3 years ago. I stared at Brad's photo in the file. He was smiling that perfect, practice smile, wearing a suit that cost $5,000. He looked invincible. He looked like he owned the world. Tell them the auditor accepts the case, I said, my voice low and steady. Are you sure? Marcus asked. You usually take a week between major ops. I am sure, I replied. This one is personal. I closed the file. The screen went black, reflecting my own face. I did not look like the poor sister in the hoodie anymore. I looked like the person who was going to burn Brad Tanaka's world to the ground, and then hand him the bill for the matches. The game had begun. Brad thought he was playing against a naive girl and her loser sister. He had no idea he had just invited the executioner to dinner. I would go to the glass obsidian. I would wear the dress. I would smile and nod. And while he mocked me in a language he thought I did not understand, I would be counting every cent he stole, preparing to present his parents with the most expensive gift of all the truth. The Glass Obsidian was the kind of restaurant that prioritized architecture over appetite, a monolith of black marble and sharp, aggressive angles situated on the 55th floor of a midtown skyscraper. It was the sort of place where the lighting was kept intentionally dim to obscure the fact that the portions were microscopic and the prices were astronomical. To get a reservation here required either a blood sacrifice or a net worth in the 8 figures, and Brad Tanaka wanted everyone in the room to know he possessed the latter. I arrived at 7 o'clock sharp, stepping out of the elevator into a lobby that smelled of chilled jasmine and old money. I had chosen my outfit with surgical precision. It was a black, mid-length dress, structured but unadorned, paired with simple pearl studs. To the untrained eye, it was boring, perhaps even dowdy. To someone who knew textiles, the vintage silk and hand-stitching whispered of quiet, enduring quality. But I knew Brad was not someone who understood quality. He only understood branding. Since there was no visible logo screaming a designer's name across my chest, I knew exactly how he would categorize me. I spotted them near the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the glitter of Central Park. Chloe waved, her smile tight and anxious. She was wearing a dress that was too bright and too ruffled. Likely something Brad had picked out to make her look like a doll. Brad sat beside her, legs crossed, holding a crystal tumbler of whiskey as if he were posing for a magazine cover that no one was ever going to publish. As I approached the table, Brad's eyes flicked over me. It was a look I had catalogued a dozen times before, a mixture of pity and dismissal, with a chaser of annoyance that I existed at all. "Linda," he said, not bothering to stand up. He gestured vaguely at the empty chair across from him. "You made it, and you are wearing that, well, I suppose black is slimming. Good effort." "Thank you, Brad," I said, my voice neutral. I sat down, placing my clutch on my lap. The view is impressive. It is the best in the city, Brad declared, puffing out his chest. My father has a permanent table here, kept on retainer. They know better than to sit in a Tanaka anywhere else. He was lying. I had scanned the restaurant's reservation logs 2 hours ago through a back door in their server. The table was booked under his corporate expense account, marked as a client acquisition dinner, and he had called 3 times to beg the maitre d' for a window seat. There were 2 other men at the table, both slick-haired and wearing suits that were slightly too shiny. Brad introduced them as Kenji and Hiro, strategic partners from a tech startup in Silicon Valley. In reality, my background check revealed they were mid-level promoters he had met at a golf club. Likely useful idiots he was trying to dazzle into investing in one of his side schemes. "Gentlemen, this is Linda," Brad said, sweeping a hand toward me as if presenting a charity case. "Chloe's older sister. She is currently exploring her options. A bit of a free spirit. You know, she is trying to find herself before settling into a real career." Chloe opened her mouth to protest, perhaps to mention that I had been working steadily for a decade, but Brad placed a heavy hand on her forearm, silencing her. "It is tough out there," Kenji said, giving me a sympathetic nod that bordered on condescension. "The job market is brutal if you do not have a specialization." "I manage," I said softly, unfolding my napkin. "She scrapes by," Brad corrected, chuckling. "But we look out for family, right? That is the Tanaka way. We support those who cannot support themselves." He took a sip of his whiskey, and I watched the liquid tremble slightly in the glass. His hand was shaking. For all his bravado, Brad was vibrating with tension, every 30 seconds. His eyes darted to his phone, which sat face up on the table next to his bread plate. He was waiting for something. A notification. A transfer confirmation. My earlier audit of the North American branch accounts had flagged a series of unauthorized withdrawals scheduled for late this afternoon. He was likely waiting to see if the funds had cleared, so he could cover the massive hole in the ledger before his parents arrived. He had no idea that I had personally frozen those transactions 45 minutes ago using a Level 4 administrative override. He was sweating, a thin sheen of perspiration visible on his upper lip despite the aggressive air conditioning. "So, Brad," Hiro asked, "your parents are flying in next week. That is a big deal." "Huge," Brad said, his voice going up a notch. "The Emperor, that is what we call my dad, he is coming to inspect the Empire. He wants to see how I have expanded our footprint in the States. We are talking about a major promotion after this visit, VP of Global Operations, most likely." He was projecting a fantasy so fragile that a stiff breeze could shatter it. He needed this dinner to be a performance of his success, and I was the prop he intended to use to make himself look benevolent and superior. The waiter arrived with the first course, a plate of raw scallops that cost more than my first car. Brad immediately switched languages. He turned to Kenji and Hiro, his posture shifting, his chin lifting as he slipped into Japanese. "Look at her," Brad said in Japanese, gesturing towards me with his fork. "She looks at the menu like she is afraid it will bite her. It is tragic. Really." He spoke the language fluently, but his accent was undeniably American flat and nasal, lacking the musical cadence of a native speaker. It was the Japanese of someone who had learned it in a classroom, not someone who felt it in their bones. I sat perfectly still. My expression remained one of polite, slightly vacant interest. He assumed that because I was a blonde woman from Ohio. The sounds coming out of his mouth were nothing but noise to me. He did not know about the 5 years I spent in Kyoto on a fellowship. He did not know about the doctorate in East Asian linguistics, gathering dust in a safe deposit box. He did not know that I could distinguish between the dialect of a Tokyo street vendor and the formal keigo of the imperial court. "She does look a bit lost," Kenji replied in Japanese, laughing nervously. Brad smirked, turning back to me and switching to English. "I was just telling Kenji and Hiro that you have such a natural elegance, Linda, very American, very rustic." "That is very kind of you," I said. Brad's smile widened. He was enjoying this. It was a power play, a way to assert dominance in a room where he felt insecure. By mocking me in a language I supposedly did not understand, he was creating an exclusive club of 3, leaving me on the outside. The main course arrived Wagyu beef that was seared for exactly 10 seconds on each side. As I picked up my knife and fork, Brad leaned in towards his friends again, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial volume in Japanese. "Watch this," he said in Japanese. "She eats like a hungry pig. It is embarrassing to be seen with her. I bet she has not eaten all day just to save money on groceries." He used the word buta pig. It was crude, lacking any wit. Then, he looked me dead in the eye, his face the picture of brotherly affection, and said in English, "I was just saying how healthy your appetite is. Linda, it is refreshing to see a woman who is not afraid of calories. Japanese women are so obsessed with dieting, but you are brave." "The beef is excellent," I replied, cutting a small piece, "and I appreciate the compliment. Brad?" Chloe looked between us, sensing the tension but unable to decode the mechanism. "Brad is really excited for Mom and Dad to meet you, Linda," she said, trying to bridge the gap. Brad choked on his laughter, quickly turning it into a cough. He wiped his mouth with a linen napkin, his eyes cold as they bored into mine. "Actually," Brad said, "that brings me to something I wanted to discuss." He checked his phone again. The screen remained dark. No notification of funds cleared. A vein in his temple throbbed. He was running out of time, and the stress was making him cruel. He needed to exert control over something, anything, since his financial house of cards was refusing to obey him. "About next week," Brad continued, swirling the ice in his glass. "The dinner with my parents. I have been thinking about it." "Oh?" I asked, taking a sip of water. "My parents are traditional," Brad said. "Very old school. They have certain expectations about class and pedigree. They are not like us Americans. They judge books by their covers." He gestured at me, his hand waving up and down my body. "You are great, Linda, really. But frankly, you are a bit rough around the edges. I do not want you to feel uncomfortable. And I certainly do not want my parents to get the wrong impression about the kind of family Chloe comes from." "Brad," Chloe gasped. "That is mean." "I am being realistic, babe," Brad snapped, his veneer of charm cracking for a second. "This is business. My inheritance is on the line here. We cannot afford any screw-ups." He turned back to me, his gaze hard. "I think it would be best if you sat this one out, Linda. We will tell them you were sick, or that you had a job interview. Something believable." "You do not want me to come to the family dinner?" I asked, keeping my voice steady. "It is for your own good," he said, leaning back and crossing his arms. "You would just embarrass yourself. They would ask you questions about economics or politics, and you would just stare at them. It would be painful for everyone. I am trying to protect you." I looked at him. Alan really looked at him. I saw the fear behind the arrogance. I saw a little boy playing dress-up in his father's suit, terrified that someone would turn on the lights and reveal that he was small. "I understand," I said slowly. "You are worried about appearances." "Exactly," Brad said, relieved that I was submitting. "I knew you would get it. You are a good sport. Linda, maybe we can order you some takeout that night. My treat." He turned back to his friends and switched to Japanese one last time, delivering the final blow. "Thank you, God," he said to them in Japanese. "I just saved myself from a disaster. If my mother saw this peasant woman, she would cancel the wedding immediately. The bloodline must be protected from mediocrity." He laughed, a sound that was loud and hollow in the quiet restaurant. "You are a genius, Brad-san," Hiro said, raising his glass. "I know," Brad replied in Japanese. "Handling these low-class Americans is easy. You just have to tell them what they want to hear." I smiled. It was a genuine smile, though not for the reasons he thought. I smiled because he had just handed me the key to his destruction. He wanted me absent. He wanted me to be invisible. Perfect. "If that is what you want, Brad," I said in English, my voice soft as velvet, "I will not interfere with your big night. I would hate to be the reason things go wrong for you." "That is the spirit," Brad said, clapping his hands. "Waiter, another round of the 25-year-old scotch. Put it on the tab." He checked his phone one last time. Still nothing. He shoved it into his pocket with a frown, but quickly masked it with a grin. He thought he had won this round. He thought he had successfully banished the embarrassment of his fiancé's sister. He had no idea that while he was busy banning Linda Stratton from the dinner, his father had already hired the auditor to preside over it. He was worried about me embarrassing him socially. He should have been worried about me dismantling him legally. "To family," Brad toasted, raising his glass high. "To family," I repeated, lifting my water glass. "And to the inevitable, violent correction of errors," I added silently. I finished my meal with the calm satisfaction of a predator watching its prey settle in for a nap. The Wagyu was indeed delicious, but the anticipation of next week tasted even better. When the check came, Brad made a show of signing for it without looking at the total, though I saw his hand tremble again as he held the pen. As we walked out of the restaurant, Brad put his arm around Chloe, whispering promises of a golden future. He did not look back at me. He thought I was just a shadow trailing behind them, fading into the dark of the New York night. He was right about one thing: I was a shadow. But he forgot that shadows are only cast when a light is about to reveal everything hidden in the dark. Next week, I would bring the sun, and Brad Tanaka was going to burn. The silence inside the offices of Silent Horizon was not the absence of sound. It was the hum of servers, the whir of cooling fans, and the rhythmic tapping of my fingers against the keyboard. I had left the stifling atmosphere of the glass obsidian and returned to the one place where lies could not survive the data stream. I sat in my ergonomic chair, the 3 monitors before me glowing with the cold blue light of absolute truth. My dress was gone, replaced by comfortable yoga pants and a fresh hoodie. Beside me, a cup of green tea steamed gently. I was no longer Linda the poor sister. I was the auditor, and I was performing an autopsy on a living company. I had already breached the firewall of Tanaka Heavy Industries' North American branch. It had been pathetically easy. Brad had set his password to his own date of birth, followed by the word success. It was a level of narcissism that made my job almost boring. But what I found inside was anything but boring. It was catastrophic. I started with the operational expenses. A healthy company flows like a river, with revenue coming in and expenses flowing out in a predictable current. Brad's branch was leaking like a sieve. I pulled up the vendor list for the last fiscal year. There were recurring payments to a consulting firm called Apex Strategy LLC, registered in Delaware, $10,000 here, $15,000 there. It added up quickly. I ran a background trace on Apex Strategy. The registered agent was a lawyer in Panama, but the IP address used to access the bank account was located in a penthouse in Manhattan. Specifically, the penthouse Brad lived in. He was paying himself consulting fees for work he never did, but that was just the tip of the iceberg. I dug deeper into the capital expenditure reports. Brad had authorized the purchase of heavy machinery cranes, excavators, industrial generators that never arrived at the warehouses. The invoices were forged. The shipping manifests were ghosts. He was draining the company's liquidity and funneling it into an offshore account in the Seychelles. Where was the money going? I opened a second window and traced the outflow from the Seychelles account. It did not go into savings. It did not go into real estate. It went into a volatile, unregulated cryptocurrency exchange. I stared at the screen, blinking in disbelief. Brad Tanaka, the self-proclaimed genius of business, had bet nearly $4 million of his family's money on a speculative altcoin that had crashed 6 months ago. He had bought at the peak and held it all the way to the bottom. He wasn't just a thief. He was a gambler with a losing hand, doubling down with chips he did not own. Then I saw the timeline. The quarterly audit from the Tokyo headquarters was scheduled for the 15th of next month. That was the deadline. If the accounts did not balance by then, the discrepancies would be flagged, and the investigation would be immediate. Brad needed to plug a hole of roughly $250,000 just to cover the minimum interest payments on the bridge loans he had taken out to hide the theft. I froze. $250,000. Chloe's inheritance from our grandmother was exactly $220,000. It had just cleared probate yesterday. The puzzle pieces snapped together with a sickening click. The rush to get married, the pressure on Chloe to sign investment papers for their future. Brad did not love my sister. He did not even like her. To him, she was not a person. She was a liquidity injection. He needed her cash to survive the audit. Once he had her money, and once the wedding was finalized, he would have access to her credit and her assets as a spouse. He was going to drain her dry to keep his own head above water for a few more months. Rage, cold and sharp, flooded my chest. I had dealt with corporate criminals who destroyed pensions and ruined livelihoods. But this was different. This was my baby sister. I picked up my secure phone and dialed a number I had not used in 6 months. "Vargas," a gravelly voice answered on the first ring. "It is the auditor," I said. "I need a physical trace. The target is Bradley K. Tanaka. I need eyes on him 24/7. I need to know who he sees, where he sleeps, and what he puts up his nose. And I needed it yesterday." "Consider it done," Vargas replied. "Digital drop or physical?" "Physical," I said. "I want the originals. Meet me at the pier in 2 hours." 2 hours later, I stood in the shadow of a shipping container at the Chelsea piers. The wind off the Hudson River was biting, cutting through my jacket. But I did not feel it. Vargas, a man who looked like he was made of old leather and cigarette smoke, handed me a thick manila envelope. "He is a busy boy," Vargas muttered, lighting a cigarette. "He has a condo in Soho that is not in his name. He keeps a mistress there, aspiring model, 19 years old. He pays her rent with a corporate credit card listed under office supplies." I opened the envelope. The photos were high resolution and undeniable. Brad enters the building, Brad embracing a girl who looked young enough to be in high school. Receipts for jewelry, receipts for a Porsche lease that wasn't for Chloe. "There is more," Vargas said, blowing smoke into the night air. "He is in deep with some bad people in Atlantic City. He owes a bookie 6 figures. They are starting to get impatient. I intercepted a text message on his burner phone. They threaten to break his legs if he does not pay up by next Friday." "Next Friday," I repeated. "The day after the engagement party." "He is desperate, boss," Vargas said. "And desperate men do dangerous things." "Thank you, Vargas. Send the bill to the usual account." I walked back to my car, the envelope heavy in my hand. I had the smoking gun. I had the bullets. I had a motive, but I could not use it yet. If I went to the police now, Brad might lawyer up and drag this out for years. Chloe would be devastated, and she might not even believe me. She would think I was fabricating evidence to ruin her happiness. No, the execution had to be public. It had to be undeniable. It had to happen in front of the only people Brad feared, his parents. My phone rang as I started the engine. It was Brad. I stared at the screen for a moment, letting the vibration rattle against the dashboard. Then I swiped the answer and put it on speaker. "Linda." His voice slurred slightly. He was drunk. "I am just calling to make sure you understood what we talked about at dinner." "I understood perfectly, Brad," I said, merging into traffic. "You want me to disappear." "I want you to know your place," he spat. The charm was gone, replaced by pure venom. "I see the way you look at me. You are jealous. You are jealous that Chloe landed a Tanaka, and you are stuck in your little sad life, counting pennies. You are nothing. You are a stain on this family." "Is that right?" I asked, my voice calm. "You are not worthy to step foot in the same room as my parents," he continued, his voice rising. "They are royalty. You are trash. If you show up at that dinner, if you say one word to embarrass me, I will make sure you never work in this city again. I have connections. I can crush you." I tightened my grip on the steering wheel. He was threatening the person who could end his life with a single keystroke. The irony was almost delicious. "Be careful, Brad," I said, keeping my tone level. "You are building a very high tower on a foundation of sand, and sometimes The highest walls fall the easiest. When they come down, they crush everyone inside. There was a pause on the other end. For a second, the drunken bravado faltered. What is that supposed to mean? It means you should enjoy your scotch, I said, while you can still afford it. You crazy bitch, he snarled. Do not come near Chloe. Do not call her. Do not text her. You are blocked. If I see you, I will have security throw you out. The line went dead. I drove home in silence, the city lights blurring past me. I pulled up to my building, the brownstone that Brad mocked, the one I owned outright. I walked up the stairs to my apartment, feeling the weight of the coming storm. I had just unlocked my door when I heard footsteps rushing up the stairs behind me. I turned to see Chloe. Her face was red, her eyes swollen and streaming with tears. Chloe. I reached out to her. She slapped my hand away. The sound echoed in the hallway. How could you? She screamed, her voice cracking. Brad told me everything. He told me what you said to him. Chloe, listen to me. No, you listen, she sobbed, backing away from me. He told me you threatened him. He said you are jealous of his money and you are trying to blackmail him. He showed me the messages. He must have faked text messages. Of course he did. He is lying, Chloe, I said gently. Brad is not who you think he is. Stop it, she shrieked, covering her ears. Stop trying to ruin this for me. You have always been like this. You are miserable. So you want everyone else to be miserable too. Why can't you just be happy for me? Why do you have to be so toxic? Her words cut deeper than any knife. I looked at my little sister, the girl I had helped raise after our parents died. She was shaking, terrified of losing the fairy tale she thought she had found. She was under his spell, blinded by his gaslighting. If I showed her the photos now, she would not believe them. She would think I photoshopped them. If I showed her the bank statements, she would say I hacked his accounts to frame him. Brad had inoculated her against the truth. He had turned her against me so that I would have no allies. I had to take the hit. I had to let her hate me. It was the only way to keep her close enough to save her. I am sorry you feel that way, Chloe, I said, my voice barely a whisper. I hate you, she choked out, wiping her nose with the back of her hand. Do not come to the wedding. Do not come to dinner. I do not want to see you. She turned and ran down the stairs, her sobbing echoing in the stairwell. I stood there for a long time, staring at the empty space where she had been. My heart felt like it was being squeezed in a vice. I wanted to chase after her. I wanted to shake her and scream the truth. But I forced myself to step back into my apartment and close the door. I walked over to my desk and placed the manila envelope next to my laptop. Let him think he has won. Let him think he has isolated me. Let him think he has successfully cut me out of the picture. Brad Tanaka had made a fatal error. He had turned this into a war. He thought he had disarmed me by taking away my sister's love, but all he had done was remove the only thing holding me back. I sat down at my computer and opened a new file. I named it The Final Judgment. I would not just expose him. I was going to obliterate him, and when the dust settled, Chloe would hate me for destroying her dream. But she would be free. That was the burden I had to carry. I picked up the phone and dialed Marcus at Silent Horizon. It is Linda, I said, my voice devoid of emotion. Prepare the final dossier. I want it bound in leather, gold leaf lettering, and book a courier for the night of the dinner. We are going to make a special delivery. Copy that, Marcus said. Are you okay, Linda? I am fine, I lied. I am just ready to work. The screen glowed, waiting for my command. The numbers danced before my eyes, aligning into a weapon of mass destruction. Brad Tanaka had 3 days left of his life as he knew it. He should have learned the first rule of survival: never humiliate the person who holds the ledger. The rain in New York does not wash the city clean. It merely slicks the grime with a varnish of gray reflection. It was on such a morning, 48 hours before the scheduled arrival, that a black limousine with tinted windows pulled into the private underground loading dock of the Silent Horizon building. Mr. and Mrs. Tanaka had arrived early. In the world of high-stakes corporate governance, arriving early is not a sign of eagerness, it is a symptom of anxiety. It suggests a lack of trust in the reports being sent from halfway across the world. They were not here to celebrate an engagement. They were here to perform a diagnosis on a dying patient. I watched them from the security monitors in my command center. Kenji Tanaka, the patriarch, walked with the stiffness of a man carrying a heavy burden. He wore a dark suit that was tailored to perfection, yet it seemed to hang loosely on his frame, as if the stress of the last quarter had physically eroded him. Beside him was Emi Tanaka. She was smaller, dressed in a muted gray silk ensemble, but her eyes were sharp, scanning the concrete walls of the parking garage as if looking for cracks in the foundation. They were ushered into the elevator by my security chief. They did not speak to each other. They held hands, a gesture that was less about affection and more about mutual support, like two survivors clinging to driftwood in a storm. I had prepared the annex for them. It was a special meeting room on the top floor, designed specifically for clients who valued discretion above all else. I had stripped the room of Western furniture. The floor was covered in authentic tatami mats imported from Kyoto. A single scroll of calligraphy hung on the wall, reading Muga Selflessness, or the Void. The scent of high-grade matcha and sandalwood hung in the air, a sensory bridge to their homeland. But the most important feature was the screen. A hand-painted silk shoji screen divided the room in two. On one side, a low table for the guests. On the other hand, my domain. I sat behind the screen, legs folded beneath me. I wore a plain black kimono, unadorned, blending into the shadows. My face was covered by a simple white porcelain mask, and a voice modulator was clipped to my collar. To the world, I was Linda Stratton, nobody. To the Tanakas, I was about to become the ghost. The sliding door opened. Soft footsteps brushed against the tatami. "Please, sit," I said. My voice emerged from the hidden speakers not as my own, but as a low, androgynous hum, stripped of age and gender. It was the voice of pure data. "Mr. and Mrs." Tanaka hesitated, then bowed deeply toward the screen before kneeling at the table. "We are honored that you agreed to see us on such short notice." "Mr." Tanaka said, his voice rough with fatigue. "We have heard rumors of the one called the Ghost. They say you can see what is hidden in the dark." "Darkness is only the absence of information," I replied. "I provide the light, but be warned, Tanaka-san, the light does not care if what it reveals is beautiful or ugly. It only reveals, we are prepared for the truth." "Mrs." Tanaka said softly. Her voice was melodious, but there was steel underneath. "Our company, Tanaka Heavy Industries, is more than a business. It is our legacy. It is the honor of our ancestors. We feel it slipping away." "You feel it because it is being stolen," I said. I pressed a button on my console. A hidden projector hummed to life, casting a series of charts and graphs onto the white wall beside them. The numbers were stark red against the white background. "This is the financial heart of your North American branch," I narrated, keeping my tone devoid of emotion. "Revenue is down 15% year over year. Operating costs are up 22%. But those are just the surface wounds. The fatal injury is here." I highlighted a section of the spreadsheet. 3 separate shell companies, I continued. Consulting fees, equipment rentals, marketing retainers, millions of dollars flowing out of your accounts every month into a black hole. The contracts are signed by your regional director. The invoices are approved by your regional director. The money trails vanish into offshore accounts controlled by your regional director. The room was silent. The only sound was the soft hum of the ventilation system. "Mr." Tanaka stared at the projection, his face pale. He knew who the regional director was. He had appointed him. He had raised him. "It is incompetence." "Mr." Tanaka asked, his voice trembling. "Is he being duped? Is he being taken advantage of by bad advisors?" It was a father's plea. He wanted to believe his son was a fool, because the alternative was that his son was a traitor. "It is not incompetence," Tanaka-san, I said ruthlessly. It is predation. The structure of the embezzlement is sophisticated. It requires intimate knowledge of your internal auditing cycles. The thief knows exactly when you look, and he moves the money when you blink. This is not the work of a victim. It is the work of an architect. Mister? Tanaka closed his eyes and lowered his head. His hands clenched into fists on his knees. My son, he whispered. Brad. I did not speak a name, I said. I only speak the numbers. The numbers say that the man running your American operations is treating the company like a personal piggy bank. He is gambling with your reputation. He is leveraging your assets to cover personal debts. Debts, Mrs. Tanaka asked sharply. What kind of debts? Gambling, I said. High-risk cryptocurrency speculation and lifestyle maintenance, the luxury cars, the penthouses, the parties. He is burning your legacy to keep himself warm. Mr. Tanaka let out a sound that was half groan, half sob. I gave him everything. I sent him to the best schools. I gave him the keys to the kingdom. Why is it not enough? For some men, there is no such thing as enough, I said. There is only more. I paused, letting the weight of the revelations settle on their shoulders. This was the cruelty of the truth. It shattered the illusion of family honor. There is more, I added. He is attempting to cover the deficit before your arrival. He is currently liquidating assets that do not belong to him. He is maneuvering to marry a young woman quickly, not for love, but to access her inheritance to plug the hole in your ledger. Mr. Tanaka's head snapped up. The Stratton girl, Chloe. She is the target, I confirmed. He views her as a financial instrument, a liquidity injection. Once he has her money, she will be discarded, just as he has discarded the loyalty he owes you. Mrs. Tanaka reached out and placed her hand over her husband's fist. She looked at the screen, her eyes narrowing, as if trying to pierce the silk and see the face behind it. You know a great deal about our family. Ghost-san, she said. You speak with the precision of a surgeon, but also with the anger of a judge. Why take this case? We are just another failing company to you. Are we not? She was perceptive, dangerously so. I had to tread carefully. I despise waste, I replied. And I despise those who abuse the trust placed in them. When a foundation is rotten, the whole house falls. I am here to ensure the house stands, even if we must remove the rot. Mr. Tanaka took a deep breath and straightened his back. The sorrow in his eyes was replaced by a cold, hard resolve. The Emperor had returned. What is your proposal? He asked. Total control, I said. You cannot fix this with a reprimand. You cannot fix this with a demotion. If you confront him now, he will destroy the evidence. He will blame his subordinates. He will manipulate the girl. He will drag your name through the mud of the American courts. I slid a document under the gap at the bottom of the screen. It was a single page, heavy bond paper, with the Silent Horizon seal in gold at the top. This is a plenary power of attorney, I explained. It grants me, under the authority of Silent Horizon, absolute executive power over the North American branch for a period of 72 hours. It gives me the right to fire, to hire, to freeze assets, and to prosecute. It supersedes the authority of the regional director. It supersedes even your authority. Until the job is done. Mr. Tanaka picked up the paper. His hand shook slightly. You are asking me to hand over my company to a stranger. I am asking you to hand me the sword, I corrected, so I can cut out the cancer that you are too close to see. You cannot do it, Tanaka-san. He is your blood. You will hesitate, and in that moment of hesitation, he will strike. I will not hesitate. And the engagement, Mrs. Tanaka asked, the dinner next week. The dinner will proceed, I said. That is where the judgment will be delivered. He believes he is hosting a celebration. In reality, he will be hosting his own trial. You must play your part. You must be the proud parents. You must give him hope. Let him believe he has won. Let him climb to the very top of his mountain. So the fall will be fatal. Mrs. Tanaka finished. Precisely, I said. The room fell silent again. The rain beat against the soundproof windows, a distant rhythm of the outside world. Inside, a dynasty was deciding its future. Mr. Tanaka looked at his wife. They communicated without words. A conversation of subtle nods and shared pain held over 40 years of marriage. He saw the necessity of it. He saw that his love for his son had become the very thing endangering the family. We have no choice, Mr. Tanaka said, his voice hollow. If we do not stop him, the board in Tokyo will remove us. The banks will recall our loans. The name Tanaka will become synonymous with fraud. He took a gold fountain pen from his jacket pocket. The scratch of the nib against the paper sounded like a scream in the quiet room. He signed his name with a flourish, then pressed his personal seal, his hanko, onto the document in red ink. He slid the paper back under the screen. I picked it up. The ink was still wet. It was done. I held the legal authority of the Tanaka Empire in my hands. Brad was no longer a director. He was a trespasser in his own office. He just did not know it yet. There is one condition, Mr. Tanaka said, staring at the silhouette of my head behind the screen. When the moment comes, when you reveal him for what he is, I want to look him in the eye. I want him to know that this judgment comes from us, not just from a shadow. He will know, I promised. He will know that he did not just break a law. He broke a bond, and he will answer you. Good, Mr. Tanaka whispered. He stood up, looking older than when he had entered. Come, Emmy, we have a performance to prepare for. Mrs. Tanaka lingered for a moment. She stood up and bowed towards the screen. A deep, respectful bow usually reserved for tea masters or high priests. Arigato, sensei, she said softly. Whoever you are, you have a sadness in your voice that matches our own. I hope that in saving our family, you can find some peace for yourself. I did not answer. I could not answer. I waited until the heavy door clicked shut behind them. I removed the mask and set it on the table. My face was pale in the dim light. I touched the signature on the paper. Peace, no. There would be no peace, not yet. I had the weapon. I had the authority. Now I had to build the trap. I picked up the secure phone and dialed Marcus. They signed, I said. Initiate Phase 2. I want forensic accountants in the Silent Horizon uniforms ready to move on my signal, and Marcus, get me the guest list for the engagement party. I need to make a seating chart. A seating chart? Marcus asked, confused. For who? For the execution, I said. I want to make sure everyone has a front row seat. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the rain-soaked city. Somewhere out there, Brad was laughing, drinking expensive scotch, and thinking he was the smartest man in the room. He was planning to humiliate me. He was planning to rob my sister. He had 48 hours of happiness left. I would let him enjoy them, because when I was finished with him, he would wish he had never learned to speak a word of Japanese. He would wish he had never learned to speak at all. I sat in the darkened command center of Silent Horizon, the glow of the monitors painting my face in cool hues of blue and gray. It was 9 o'clock in the morning, exactly 24 hours before the engagement dinner. The timing had to be precise. If I pushed Brad too early, he might run. If I pushed him too late, he might succeed in stealing Chloe's future. I needed him in the Goldilocks zone of panic, desperate enough to make a fatal mistake, but paralyzed enough to stay put. I opened a secure terminal and drafted an email. The sender address was spoofed to look like it originated from the internal auditing department of Tanaka Heavy Industries in Tokyo. The subject line was simple: Notice of Unscheduled Compliance Review, North American Sector. The body of the email was brief. It stated that due to irregularities in the quarterly projections, a special compliance team would be arriving alongside the chairman to conduct a forensic analysis of all liquid assets. I hit send. 3 minutes later, on the surveillance monitor provided by Vargas, I saw Brad react. He was in his office, feet up on the desk, looking smug. Then his phone pinged. He glanced at it, and his feet dropped to the floor. He stood up, knocking over his coffee cup. He paced the length of the office, running his hands through his hair. He was shouting at his assistant, though the audio feed was muted. He looked like a rat that had just realized the maze has no exit. The first domino had fallen. Now, the desperation would set in. At 11:30, my phone buzzed. It was Vargas. "He is on the move," Vargas reported. "He just left the office. He is driving fast. Too fast. He is heading towards Queens." "He is going to see Chloe," I said, my voice flat. "He knows the walls are closing in. He needs the money now. Do you want me to intercept?" "No," I replied. "Let him go. I have a different kind of roadblock waiting for him." I hung up and dialed a number that belonged to Julian Sterling, my personal attorney and the most ruthless estate lawyer in New York. Julian was the kind of man who ate ethics for breakfast and billed you for indigestion. "Julian," I said, "it is happening." "I see the alert." Julian's smooth voice came through the line. "I have the probate court on the other line. We are ready." "Execute the freeze," I ordered. "Clause 14, Section B. The undue influence provision." Julian chuckled. "Classic. It will hold up the transfer for at least 72 hours. Long enough for your purposes." "More than enough," I said. I switched the monitor to the feed from the hidden camera I had installed in the hallway of Chloe's apartment building, my building. 10 minutes later, Brad stormed up the stairs. He banged on Chloe's door until she opened it. Even without audio, the body language was clear. Brad was frantic. He was waving papers in her face. He was grabbing her shoulders, shaking her slightly. Chloe looked confused, then frightened. She retreated into the apartment, and he followed, slamming the door. I activated the audio bug I had placed in Chloe's living room lamp. "Just sign the damn papers." "Chloe," Brad's voice was ragged, "it is just a formality. We are getting married in a few months anyway. This is for an investment, a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. It expires at 5 o'clock today." "But Brad, I do not understand," Chloe stammered, her voice trembling. "My lawyer said I should wait until after the wedding to merge our assets. He said—" "Your lawyer is an idiot," Brad screamed. "Do you trust some suit more than your future husband? I am trying to build an empire for us, for our children, and you are worried about what, a few $100,000. That is pocket change to me. I am insulted that you even hesitate." "I am not hesitating," Chloe cried. "You are just scaring me. You are sweating. You look crazy." "I am under pressure," Brad yelled, then immediately softened his tone, a manipulative switch that made my stomach turn. "Baby, listen, I am sorry. I want everything to be perfect for my parents. This investment. It will prove to them that I can stand on my own 2 feet. If I miss this, I look like a failure." "Do you want me to look like a failure?" "No, of course not," Chloe sniffled. "Then sign, please, for me." I heard the rustle of paper, the uncapping of a pen. My heart hammered against my ribs. "Come on, Julian." "Okay," Chloe whispered. "I will sign." Suddenly, Chloe's phone rang. It was loud in the tense silence of the room. "Ignore it," Brad commanded. "It is Mr. Sterling," Chloe said, looking at the screen. "The estate executor." "Do not answer it," Brad hissed. But Chloe, bless her rule-following heart, answered, "Hello." I could not hear Julian's side of the conversation, but I knew exactly what he was saying. "Miss Stratton, I am calling to inform you that due to a procedural error in your grandmother's filing, all assets are temporarily frozen pending a judicial review. No transfers can be authorized for 3 business days." "What?" Chloe gasped. "Frozen butt? Brad is here right now. We were just—" She listened for another moment, her eyes widening. "Oh, I see. No, I understand. Thank you." She hung up and looked at Brad. "Brad, the money, it is frozen. The lawyer said I cannot touch it until next week." There was a silence so heavy it felt like it could crush the furniture. "You are lying," Brad whispered. "I am not," Chloe said, showing him the phone. "Call him yourself. He said it was a court order." Brad let out a scream of primal frustration. I heard the sound of glass shattering. He had thrown something, likely a vase, against the wall. "Useless," he roared. "Everything about your family is useless." He stormed out of the apartment, slamming the door so hard the camera feed shook. I exhaled, leaning back in my chair. Chloe was safe. Her money was safe. But now, Brad was a cornered animal. He had no way to cover the theft. He had one card left to play: the illusion of power. He would pivot. If he could not pay the money back, he had to charm his parents so thoroughly that they wouldn't look at the books, or he had to rush the wedding so he could legally access Chloe's credit lines before the audit completed. By 2 o'clock in the afternoon, the courier arrived at my apartment. I opened the heavy cream envelope. Inside was an invitation to the engagement dinner at his penthouse. It was embossed with gold leaf. And there, clipped to the card, was a handwritten note from Brad. "Linda, since you insisted on coming, I have made a special arrangement for you. You will be seated at table 19. Try not to make too much noise. The adults will be talking." I checked the seating chart I had pulled from his event planner server. Table 19 was in the back corner, next to the service entrance to the kitchen. It was the table usually reserved for the photographer's assistant or the band's sound guy. It was the ultimate insult. He wanted me there, but he wanted me invisible. He wanted to show his parents that I was a servant in my own sister's life. I smiled. He put me in the kitchen. That meant I would be the first person the staff saw. It meant I had the best view of the entire room without being watched. It was tactical perfection. I tossed the invitation onto my desk and walked to my closet. For years, I had worn the armor of the invisible woman. Hoodies, jeans, sneakers. It was a comfortable disguise, but tonight demanded a different kind of armor. I reached past the rack of gray cotton and pulled out a garment bag that had not been opened in 5 years. Inside was not a dress, it was a statement. It was a bespoke suit, tailored by a master in Savile Row, who usually only cut for royalty. The fabric was a deep, midnight blue vicuna wool that looked black until the light hit it. But the secret was inside. The lining was vintage Japanese silk, patterned with golden cranes in flight, a symbol of longevity and good fortune, but also a nod to the Tanaka crest. It was masculine in its cut, but feminine in its fit. It commanded authority. It was the kind of suit you wore to a board meeting to fire the CEO. I laid it out on the bed. Next to it, I placed my jewelry. No pearls this time. I chose a single brooch, a platinum pin in the shape of a chrysanthemum. The imperial seal. It was subtle. Most Americans would just think it was a flower. Mr. and Mrs. Tanaka would recognize it instantly as a symbol of the highest order of respect and power. I spent the rest of the afternoon in meditation. I sat on the floor of my living room, closing my eyes, and let the English language fade from my mind. I summoned the rhythm of Kyoto. Kyokotoba, the dialect of the old capital. It is softer than Tokyo Japanese, more melodic, but also infinitely more complex in its levels of politeness. It is a weapon wrapped in silk. I practiced the phrases. "Oh Hideyasu, welcome. Gomen yasuo, excuse me." And the most important one, Shinjitsu, truth. I rehearsed the tea ceremony in my mind, the precise angle of the whisk, the rotation of the bowl, the way you show respect by humbling yourself, and in doing so, command the respect of others. Brad knew none of this. He thought being Japanese meant eating sushi and bowing. He did not understand that the culture was built on the concept of wa harmony, and he had disrupted the harmony. At 6 o'clock in the evening, my secure line rang. It was my contact at the bank, the one I had placed on high alert. "He just did it," the voice said. Brad Tanaka just attempted to access the emergency liquidity fund for the North American branch. He used his father's override code. "Did it go through?" I asked. "Negative. The override code was flagged as compromised thanks to the update you pushed this morning. The system locked him out and sent a security alert to the global headquarters, but I intercepted the alert before it reached Tokyo, per your instructions." "Perfect," I said. "He thinks it is just a glitch. He is screaming at the bank manager right now. He thinks it is a server error. We told him it would take 24 hours to reset." "He is trapped," I said. He has no money. He has no way out. He has to walk into that dinner naked. He is terrified, the contact said. I can hear it in his voice. He sounds like a man on the edge. I hung up. The trap was not just set. It had snapped shut. Brad was walking into that penthouse thinking he was the host of the year. In reality, he was a dead man walking. He had tried to steal from his family. He had tried to rob my sister. He had tried to humiliate me. Now, he had nothing left but his lies. And tomorrow night, in front of the people whose opinion mattered to him more than life itself, I was going to strip those lies away one by one. I looked at the suit on the bed. I looked at the invitation to table 19. His smile died when his parents corrected him. That was the headline. I went to the window and looked out at the city skyline. The rain had stopped. The clouds were breaking. The moon was rising, sharp and cold. Sleep well, Brad, I whispered to the glass. It is your last night of peaceful rest. I turned off the lights. The ghost was ready to materialize. The elevator doors opened directly into the penthouse, revealing a scene that was less a family gathering and more a desperate exhibition of wealth. Brad Tanaka had turned his living room into a Versailles of the 21st century. Crystal chandeliers, rented for the evening, dripped light onto a floor crowded with people who looked like they had been curated rather than invited. There were hedge fund managers with predatory smiles, socialites with faces frozen by Botox, and minor celebrities checking their reflections in the silverware. The air smelled of expensive perfume and nervous energy. Waiters in white gloves moved through the crowd like ghosts, carrying trays of champagne and hors d'oeuvres topped with caviar that probably cost more than my monthly utility bill. It was a masterclass in overcompensation. I stepped out of the elevator. I was not wearing a hoodie. My midnight blue suit absorbed the light rather than reflecting it. The cut was sharp enough to draw blood. The trousers fell in a perfect line to my black leather Oxfords. My hair was slicked back, revealing the severe architecture of my face, unsoftened by makeup. The platinum chrysanthemum brooch on my lapel caught the light with a cold, singular gleam. A hush rippled through the immediate vicinity. People turned, expecting to see a diplomat or a CEO. When they saw me, confusion flickered in their eyes. They did not know who I was, but the clothes told them I was someone who mattered. Brad spotted me from across the room. He was holding court near the grand piano, a glass of scotch in one hand and Chloe's arm in the other. Chloe looked pale and terrified, her eyes darting around the room as if searching for an exit. When she saw me, her breath hitched. Brad's reaction was different. He stared for a moment, his brain trying to reconcile the image of Linda the loser with the woman standing before him. Then, a smirk broke through. He whispered something to the man next to him, a vice president from a rival bank, and they both chuckled. He strode over to me, dragging Chloe with him. Well, well, Brad said, his voice loud enough to turn heads. Look who decided to play dress-up. Did you rent that, Linda? Or did you raid a thrift store in the theater district? Hello, Brad, I said. My voice was low, calm, and carried no inflection. Hello, Chloe. Chloe looked at my suit, her eyes widening. She recognized the quality. She reached out a trembling hand. Linda, you look... She looks like a waiter who got lost, Brad interrupted, laughing. Seriously, Linda, I told you to dress nicely. Not like you are about to serve a subpoena, but I guess effort counts for something. He leaned in close, his breath heavy with alcohol. Table 19 is back there, by the kitchen. Try not to spill anything on the suit. The rental deposit must be huge. I will keep that in mind, I said. Just then, the main doors to the penthouse opened. The room fell silent. Mr. and Mrs. Tanaka entered. They did not look like they were attending a party. They looked like they were attending a funeral. Mr. Tanaka wore a traditional black formal kimono with the family crest. The moon, emblazoned in white on the chest. Mrs. Tanaka matched him in a kimono of deep indigo, patterned with falling autumn leaves, a symbol of ending, of transition. They stood at the threshold, observing the garish display before them. Mr. Tanaka's eyes swept over the rented chandeliers, the noisy crowd, the excess of it all. His jaw tightened. This was not hospitality. This was a waste. This was motainai. Brad rushed forward, abandoning me and Chloe to greet them. "Mother, father," he exclaimed in English, spreading his arms wide. "Welcome to my humble home. I am so glad you made it. Look around. This is what I have built. This is the American dream." He bowed, but it was sloppy. He bent at the waist too quickly, his eyes not lowering respectfully. It was the bow of a salesman, not a son. "Mr." Tanaka did not bow back. He simply nodded, a microscopic inclination of his head. "It is elaborate," Mrs. Tanaka said, her voice polite but icy. "We did not expect so many strangers." "They are not strangers," Brad insisted, guiding them into the room. "These are the movers and shakers of New York. They are here to honor you." He led them towards where I was standing. This was it. The moment he had been waiting for. The humiliation. "Mother, father," Brad said, gesturing to me with a flourish of his hand. "I believe you have not met the other Stratton sisters. This is Linda." He paused for effect, grinning at the crowd that had gathered to watch. "Linda is special," Brad continued, his tone dripping with condescension. "She is Chloe's older sister. She has never really found her footing in the world, still figuring things out. You know, she has never stepped foot outside of the U.S. Very simple, very provincial, but we love her anyway. Mr. Tanaka turned his gaze to me. His eyes were dark, intelligent, and weary. He looked at my face. He looked at my suit. He looked at the chrysanthemum pin. His eyes widened slightly. A flicker of recognition passed through them, not of my face, but of the energy. He had felt this presence before, in a dark room with a silk screen between us. Mrs. Tanaka tilted her head. She studied the way I stood, feet shoulder-width apart, hands relaxed at my sides, spine steel straight. It was the posture of a martial artist or a master negotiator. "It is a pleasure to meet you, Miss Stratton," Mr. Tanaka said, his English slow and precise. He bowed. It was not a deep bow, but it was a respectful one. "The honor is mine, Tanaka-san," I replied. I bowed in return. My bow was deeper than his, held for exactly 2 seconds, the angle perfect. Brad laughed nervously. "Look at her. She watched a YouTube video on how to bow. Isn't that cute? She is trying so hard to impress you." Chloe stepped forward, her face flushing red. "Brad, stop it. Linda is smart. She is—" "Hush, babe," Brad snapped, cutting her off. "I'm just making introductions." He turned back to his parents. "Come, let's sit. I have the head table reserved for us. Linda, your table is over there." He pointed a finger towards the swinging doors of the kitchen, where a busboy was currently dropping a tray of silverware. Mr. Tanaka looked at where Brad was pointing, then back at me. His brow furrowed. He seemed about to speak, perhaps to object, but I caught his eye. I gave a microscopic shake of my head. "Not yet." Mr. Tanaka hesitated, then nodded. He understood. The play must continue. "We will sit," Mr. Tanaka said. We moved to the dining area. The head table was raised on a platform, like a throne. Brad sat in the center, with Chloe on his right and his parents on his left. I walked to table 19. It was a small, wobbly circular table shoved against the wall. The tablecloth was stained. There was no centerpiece. I sat down, my back to the kitchen door, facing the room. From this vantage point, I could see everything. The dinner service began. It was a disaster of etiquette. Brad had ordered a fusion menu sushi served alongside foie gras. Tempura dripped in truffle oil. It was confusing and messy. "Father," Brad boomed, holding up a piece of sushi with a fork. "This is from the best chef in the city. I told him to make it extra spicy for you. I know you love flavor." Mr. Tanaka stared at the sushi. In traditional Japanese culture, sushi is about the purity of the fish, not the spice. Using a fork was an insult to the chef. "It is interesting," Mr. Tanaka said quietly. "And the sake," Brad shouted, snapping his fingers for a waiter. "Pour the sake. This is the most expensive bottle they had, $5,000. Can you believe it?" The waiter poured the sake. Brad grabbed his cup and downed it in one gulp like a shot of tequila. "Kanpai," he yelled. Mrs. Tanaka winced. Sake is meant to be sipped, savored, and you never pour for yourself or drink before the eldest has lifted their cup. "Brad," Chloe whispered, touching his arm. "Maybe slow down. Relax." Brad brushed her off, his face flushed. "We are celebrating. My parents are proud of me. Right, Dad?" Mr. Tanaka did not answer. He was looking at his son with an expression that was heartbreaking. It was the look of a man realizing that the child he loved had become a stranger who viewed their culture as a costume and their wealth as a toy. Brad mistook the silence for awe. He stood up, tapping his glass with a knife. The sharp clink, clink, clink silenced the room. "Attention, everyone," Brad announced. "I want to make a toast." He looked at Chloe, then at his parents, and finally, his eyes found me in the back of the room. He smiled. It was a cruel, predatory smile. "To family," he began, "and to know who belongs and who does not." He was winding up for the kill. He was about to deliver the speech he had rehearsed, the one where he would humiliate me in Japanese to assert his dominance. I sat perfectly still. My hand rested on the table, next to my water glass. Under the table, my fingers brushed against the leather portfolio I had brought with me. The air in the room grew heavy. The guests sensed the tension. They looked from the sweating, manic man on the stage to the silent, stoic woman in the back. Brad cleared his throat. He looked at his father. "Father," he said, switching to Japanese, "I have something I want to tell you about this marriage." The language was clumsy, the vowels flat, but the intent was clear. The trap was open. He was walking right into it. I took a sip of water. "Go ahead, Brad," I thought. "Say it. Say the words that will end you." The air in the penthouse had become thick, suffocating, and heavy with the scent of stale ambition. Brad Tanaka stood at the head table, swaying slightly like a tree with rotting roots in a strong wind. He had unbuttoned his collar, loosening the silk tie that he had probably watched a tutorial to learn how to knot. His face was flushed with a dangerous cocktail of 25-year-old scotch and unchecked narcissism. To the rest of the room, he looked like a passionate man overcome by the emotion of the evening. To me, watching from the exile of Table 19, he looked like a bomb that had finally decided to detonate. The guests had stopped eating. The clatter of silverware against china had died down, replaced by an awkward, expectant silence. They were the elite of New York sharks in suits and dresses, and they could smell blood in the water. They did not know whose blood it was yet, but they knew someone was bleeding. Brad tapped the microphone again, the feedback screeching through the room and making Mrs. Tanaka wince. "Family," Brad slurred into the mic, his voice booming too loudly for the intimate space. "It is a funny word, isn't it? We choose our friends, but we are stuck with our family, unless we choose to upgrade." He laughed at his own joke. A few people in the crowd chuckled nervously, unsure if this was wit or malice. Brad turned his back to the room, facing his parents and Chloe. He leaned one hand on the table to steady himself, looming over them. "I want to speak to my parents now," Brad announced, his voice dropping to a theatrical whisper. "And since this is a private matter, a matter of honor, I will speak in the language of our ancestors." He cleared his throat, puffing out his chest. He looked at Mr. Tanaka, desperation warring with arrogance in his eyes. He needed to sell this. He needed to convince them that he was the dutiful Japanese son, effectively erasing the American fraud he had become. He began to speak in Japanese. "Father, mother," he said, the vowels flat and Americanized, lacking the grace of a native speaker. "I know you are worried. I know the reports look bad, but you have to trust me." He paused, glancing at Chloe, who was looking up at him with adoring, confused eyes. She squeezed his hand, thinking he was declaring his devotion. Brad looked down at her, his expression twisting into a sneer that he quickly hid from his parents, but displayed clearly to me. "I am only marrying this girl because she is soft," Brad said in Japanese. "She is weak-minded. She does exactly what I tell her to do, and she just inherited $250,000. It is not a fortune, but it is enough to stop the bleeding in the accounts until the next quarter." The room was silent. The guests watched, captivated by the foreign words. Assuming they were hearing poetry, Chloe smiled, squeezing his hand tighter. "Oh, Brad," she whispered. Brad pulled the microphone away and looked at the crowd, switching to English with a bright, fake smile. "I was just telling my parents," he lied smoothly, "that Chloe is the light of my life, that her soul is pure, and that she has taught me the true meaning of partnership." A collective awe rippled through the room. Chloe wiped a tear from her eye. I gripped the stem of my water glass. The glass was cold, but my blood was boiling. He was selling her out. He was confessing to his crimes in plain sight, using the language barrier as a shield. Brad put the microphone back to his lips and returned to Japanese. "Do not worry about her," he continued, gesturing dismissively at Chloe. "Once the money is transferred and the audit is clear, I will deal with her. She is just a vessel, a means to an end. Tanaka does not settle for mediocrity forever." "Mr." Tanaka's hands were clenched on the tablecloth. His knuckles were white. He was a man of immense discipline, but I could see the tremor in his jaw. He was listening to his son desecrate the sanctity of marriage and family. He was listening to a confession of manipulation. Then, Brad turned his eyes toward the back of the room, toward the kitchen doors, toward me. His eyes narrowed. The malice in them was undisguised now. He hated me. He hated that I knew him. He hated that I saw through the expensive suit to the frightened little boy underneath. He pointed a finger at me. "And as for that thing," Brad said in Japanese, his voice dripping with venom, "that waste of space over there, the sister." He used the word gomi, trash, garbage, unwanted refuse. "She is a leech," he spat in Japanese. "She lives in a rat-hole apartment. She drives a car that should be in a junkyard. She is jealous of my success. She is jealous that I'm taking Chloe away from their miserable, poverty-stricken life." He laughed, a cruel, what sound. "She thinks she is special because she put on a suit tonight," he continued, mocking my attire. "But you can put a ribbon on a pig, and it is still pork. She is nothing. She is dirt beneath the shoes of a Tanaka." The insults hung in the air, toxic and heavy. Even though the guests did not understand the words, they felt the hate. They saw the way he pointed. They saw the snarl on his face. The atmosphere in the room shifted from awkward to uncomfortable. People shifted in their seats, looking down at their plates. Brad lowered the microphone again, turning his megawatt smile back to the audience. "I was just explaining to my mother and father," he said in English, his voice dripping with faux sincerity, "that Linda is a survivor, that despite her many struggles and her limitations, she is a strong woman. We are so proud of how hard she tries." He paused for applause, but it was scattered and weak. He did not care. He was on a roll. He turned back to his parents, his face darkening again as he switched back to Japanese for the finale. "They are all the same," he snarled in Japanese, sweeping his hand to include both Chloe and me. "These Americans, they have no honor. They have no culture. They are just gold-digging peasants. They see the name Tanaka, and they see dollar signs. But do not worry, Father, I am using them. I am using their money to save our empire, and when I am done with them, I will discard them like the trash they are." Gold-digging peasants. The phrase hit Mr. Tanaka like a physical slap. To a man who valued honor above life itself, this was the ultimate disgrace. His son was not just a thief. He was a monster without a soul. "Mr." Tanaka started to rise. His face was purple with rage. He placed his hands on the table, ready to push himself up, ready to scream, ready to disown his son right there in front of half of Manhattan. "Brad, Mr. Tanaka began, his voice choking with fury. Brad looked confused, blinking at his father's sudden movement. But before Mr. Tanaka could speak, before he could ruin the trap I had so carefully laid, I moved. I did not stand up yet. I simply raised my right hand. I held it in the air, palm open, fingers slightly curled. It was a subtle gesture, commanding yet calm. I caught Mr. Tanaka's eye from across the room. Stop. I held his gaze. My eyes were not the eyes of Linda the sister. They were the eyes of the auditor. They were cold, precise, and absolute. Mr. Tanaka froze. He saw the command in my eyes. He remembered the promise he had made in the tea room. Total control. He remembered that I was the one holding the sword. Slowly, agonizingly, Mr. Tanaka sat back down. He exhaled a breath that shuddered through his entire body. He closed his eyes for a second, bowing his head in submission to the strategy. Brad missed the exchange entirely. He was too busy refilling his glass. He thought his father was just overcome with emotion at his brilliant speech. "See," Brad said to the room in English, gesturing to his father. "My father is moved. He knows passion when he sees it." Brad took another long drink. He wiped his mouth with the back of his hand. He looked at me again. He wasn't done. He wanted to twist the knife. He wanted a reaction. He wanted to see me cry. He wanted to see me run out of the room so he could laugh about it later with his sycophants. "Linda," he called out in English, his voice echoing off the vaulted ceiling. "Why so quiet? Cat got your tongue." He stepped off the platform and began to walk towards me. The crowd parted like the Red Sea, terrified of being caught in the crossfire. He walked with a swagger that was unearned, the microphone dangling from his hand. He stopped 5 feet from my table. He towered over me, swaying slightly. "I just gave a beautiful speech about your family," he sneered. "About how much I tolerate you. And you just sit there. No thank you. No applause." I looked up at him. I did not blink. Slowly, deliberately, I pushed my chair back. The sound of the legs scraping against the marble floor was sharp and loud in the silent room. I stood up. I did not stand up like a tired freelancer. I did not stand up like a defeated sister. I uncoiled. I rose to my full height, my spine aligning with military precision. The midnight blue suit seemed to absorb the shadows in the room, making me look sharper, darker, more substantial than the man standing in front of me. I smoothed the lapel of my jacket, my fingers grazing the platinum chrysanthemum. The change in my demeanor was physical. It was a shift in atmospheric pressure. The air around me grew cold. The guests closest to me actually took a step back, sensing a danger they could not name. Brad blinked. For a second, the fog of alcohol cleared enough for him to feel a flicker of uncertainty. He looked at me, really looked at me, and realized that the woman standing there was not the woman he thought he knew. But his ego was too big to let him back down. He chuckled, a nervous sound that died in his throat. "What is this?" Brad mocked, gesturing at me with the microphone. "You want to make a toast too. You want to say something." He leaned in, his face inches from mine. "Go ahead, Linda," he taunted. "Speak. Do you even know how to speak in a room like this? Or do you only know how to beg for rent money?" He laughed again, looking back at his friends for validation. "Come on," he goaded. "Say something. Do you know anything besides hello? Or is that too complicated for you?" The silence that followed was absolute. Not a glass clinked, not a breath was drawn. The entire room was suspended in the amber of the moment. I looked at him. I looked at the sweat beading on his upper lip. I looked at the fear hiding behind his eyes. I looked at the man who had called my sister a puppet and me garbage. He wanted me to speak. He wanted me to prove my ignorance. I took a breath. It was time. The prey had walked into the cage. He had locked the door. He had handed me the key. I smiled. It was not a nice smile. It was the smile of an executioner who enjoys their work. And then, I opened my mouth. The silence in the room was a physical weight, pressing down on the lungs of every guest. They were waiting for me to stutter, They were waiting for me to mumble a pathetic greeting in English and sit back down in my shame. Brad was leaning forward, his teeth bared in a grin that was all teeth and no joy, eager to feast on my humiliation. I took a breath, letting the air fill my lungs, steady and cool. I did not look at Brad. I looked past him, locking eyes with Kenji Tanaka, the patriarch sitting on the dais like a weary emperor. And then, I pulled the trigger. "Tanaka-sama," I began, my voice clear, resonant, and pitched perfectly to carry to the back of the room without a microphone. The sound that left my lips was not English, it was Japanese, but it was not the clumsy, flat-voweled Japanese that Brad had been butchering all night. It was flawless. It was the Japanese of the tea-houses in Gion, the boardrooms of Marunouchi, and the imperial courts of the Heian period. It was Keigo, the highest form of honorific language wrapped in the soft, elegant lilt of the Kyoto dialect. "Tanaka-sama," I repeated, holding his gaze. "The lack of education displayed by your son is not your fault, but his arrogance is the poison that will kill Tanaka Heavy Industries." The effect was instantaneous. Brad's grin didn't just fade, it evaporated. It was as if someone had reached inside him and flipped a switch, cutting the power to his face. The blood drained from his skin so fast, he turned the color of old ash. His mouth hung open, slack and stupid, searching for words that his brain could no longer process. The crystal glass in his hand, which had been raised in a mock toast a moment ago, began to tremble violently, the ice cubes clinking against the rim in a frantic, tiny rhythm. A gasp rippled through the room. Not everyone understood the words, but everyone understood the tone. They understood the perfect cadence. They understood that the power dynamic in the room had just violently inverted. Mr. Tanaka's eyes widened, and for the first time that night, a spark of life returned to them. He sat up straighter, leaning forward, his ears tuning into a frequency he hadn't expected to hear in this godforsaken penthouse. I did not stop. I did not give Brad time to recover. I stepped out from behind table 19 and began to walk toward the center of the room. My movements were fluid, deliberate. I was not walking. I was advancing. "He speaks of honor," I continued in Japanese, my voice sharpening like a blade being drawn from a sheath. "Yet he stands before you and desecrates the very concept. He speaks of family, yet he plots to devour his own kin. He calls himself a Tanaka, yet he lacks the discipline to govern even his own greed." Brad took a step back. He looked like he had been physically struck. "Linda," he whispered, his voice cracking. "How?" I ignored him. He was no longer the protagonist of this scene. He was merely the evidence. I turned my gaze to the guests, then back to Mr. Tanaka, switching seamlessly into the specific terminology of forensic accounting, still in fluent Japanese. "He claims to have built an empire," I declared, my voice rising in volume. "But let us speak of reality. Let us speak of the shell company registered in Delaware under the name Apex Strategy. Let us speak of the $3,400,000 transferred from the company's operational accounts to that shell company over the last 18 months. I saw Mrs. Tanaka cover her mouth with her hand. She understood. Every number was a blow. "He tells you he is a genius investor," I continued, pointing a finger at Brad but keeping my eyes on his father. "But he does not tell you about the account in the Seychelles. He does not tell you that on January 28th, he liquidated the employee pension fund a sum of $850,000 to cover his margin calls on a cryptocurrency exchange that had already collapsed." "Stop," Brad croaked. He looked around the room, panic wild in his eyes. "Stop talking. She is lying. She is making it up." He tried to laugh, but it came out as a strangled wheeze. He looked at the guests. "She is crazy. She used an app to learn that it is gibberish." I stopped walking. I was now standing 10 feet from the head table. I turned my head slowly to look at Brad. "Gibberish," I asked in English, letting the single word hang in the air. Then I switched back to Japanese, faster this time, more aggressive. "You forged the invoices for the heavy machinery orders on December 10th. You falsified the shipping manifests for the steel beams on December 15th. You have been paying yourself consulting fees for a project that does not exist. You are not a businessman. Bradley, you are a parasite feeding on the host until it dies. Brad dropped his glass. It shattered on the marble floor, the sound exploding like a gunshot. Whiskey and ice splattered onto his shoes. But he didn't notice. He was shaking, his hands opening and closing uselessly at his sides. I turned away from him. I turned to the one person in the room who mattered more to me than the audit. I turned to Chloe. She was sitting frozen in her chair, tears streaming down her face, looking back and forth between me and the man she thought she loved. She didn't understand the Japanese. She only knew that her sister had transformed into a terrifying avenging angel, and her fiancé was crumbling into dust. I softened my face. I walked up to the edge of the dais and looked her in the eye. "Chloe," I said in English, my voice steady but gentle. "You need to know what he just said." "Linda, what is happening?" she sobbed. "Why are you doing this?" "He did not just introduce us," I told her, pointing at Brad. "He humiliated us. He stood there, in front of his parents, and he called you a puppet." Chloe flinched. "What?" "He said he is only marrying you because you are weak-minded and easy to control," I translated, quoting his words. "He said he needs your inheritance to pay his debts. He said that once he has your money, he will discard you." No, Chloe whispered, shaking her head. "He loves me. He told me. And he called me trash," I continued, my voice hardening. "He called our family gold-digging peasants. He told his father that we are nothing but dirt beneath his shoes. He is not marrying you. Chloe, he is robbing you." "Liar," Brad screamed. He lunged forward, his face purple, veins bulging in his neck. He switched to English, desperate to regain control of the narrative in front of the confused American guests. "Do not listen to her." "Chloe," Brad yelled, stumbling over the broken glass. "She is jealous. She is insane. She has always hated me because I'm successful, and she is a failure. I never said those things. She is mistranslating. She doesn't even know Japanese. She is just making sounds." He reached out to grab my arm, to physically stop me. I did not flinch. I did not step back. I simply turned my head and snapped a single command at him in Japanese. "Hikairo, back down." The word was not a request. It was a verbal whip crack. It was the command a samurai lord gives to a disobedient retainer. It carried the weight of absolute authority. Brad's body reacted before his mind could. He flinched, stopping mid-lunge, his arm retracting as if he had touched a hot stove. The sheer force of the personality shift from the Linda he mocked to the master he feared short-circuited his brain. He stumbled backward, tripping over his own feet, and fell hard onto the steps of the dais. The room gasped again. I reached into my leather bag. I pulled out a thick dossier. It was bound in black, with the red wax seal of Silent Horizon stamped on the front. I walked up the steps, stepping over Brad's legs, as if he were merely a piece of furniture that had been knocked over. I approached the table where Mr. Tanaka sat. He was looking at me with an expression of profound awe and devastating realization. He knew who I was now. He didn't just see Linda Stratton. He saw the auditor. He saw the ghost. I placed the dossier on the table in front of him. The sound of the heavy paper hitting the tablecloth was the loudest sound in the world. "The evidence, Tanaka-sama," I said in Japanese, my voice quiet and respectful again. "Every transaction, every forged signature, every stolen dollar, it is all there, including the attempt to access the emergency reserves this morning, which I personally blocked." I took a step back and bowed deep and low. "I have fulfilled my contract," I said. "The darkness has been illuminated. The judgment is yours. Mr. Tanaka stared at the dossier. His hand trembled as he reached out to touch the red seal. He looked at his wife. Mrs. Tanaka was weeping silently, not out of embarrassment, but out of the heartbreak of a mother who knows her son is gone. Brad scrambled to his knees. He looked at the dossier, then at his father. He realized the game was over. The language barrier he had used as a weapon had been torn down, and behind it, there was nowhere left to hide. "Dad," Brad whimpered in English, his voice small and pathetic. "Dad, please, let me explain. It is just a misunderstanding. I was going to pay it back, I swear. Mr. Tanaka did not look at him. He kept his eyes fixed on me. "You, Mr. Tanaka whispered in English, his voice hoarse. "You are the auditor." "I am Linda Stratton," I replied, standing tall, "and I am the sister of the woman your son tried to destroy." I turned to the crowd. They were staring at me with slack jaws. The waiters had stopped serving. The music had stopped playing. "The dinner is over," I announced in English. "I suggest you all check your portfolios. If you have invested in any of Brad's side projects, you might want to call your lawyers in the morning." I looked down at Brad, who was kneeling in the spilled whiskey and glass shards. He looked up at me, his eyes filled with a mixture of terror and hatred. "You ruined everything," he hissed. "No, Brad," I said coldly and sharply. "I just turned on the lights." I turned back to Chloe. She was staring at the man kneeling on the floor, the man who looked so small, so weak, so utterly defeated. The illusion was shattered. She didn't see a prince anymore. She saw a thief. "Chloe," I said softly, "come here." She stood up. She looked at Brad one last time. He reached a hand out to her. "Babe," he pleaded, "please." Chloe looked at his hand. Then she looked at me, and for the first time in months, I saw my sister's eyes clear. She stepped away from the table. She stepped away from him. "Don't call me babe," she whispered. And then, the sound of a slap echoed through the room. But this time, it wasn't physical. It was the sound of Mr. Tanaka opening the dossier. He put on his reading glasses. He read the first page. Slowly, deliberately, the patriarch of the Tanaka family stood up. The dossier lay open on the white tablecloth, a black scar against the pristine fabric. The red wax seal of Silent Horizon, broken now, looked like a drop of fresh blood. Mr. Tanaka stood frozen, his hand resting on the final page of the executive summary. I knew exactly what he was looking at. At the bottom of the document, right next to the line requiring the client's authorization, was a signature he had seen only once before. On the digital contracts we had exchanged 48 hours ago, it did not say Linda Stratton. It was signed with my pseudonym, the one that struck fear into boardrooms from London to Singapore, the auditor. He looked at the signature. Then he looked at the power of attorney document he had signed in the tea room, realizing the name Linda Stratton was printed clearly as the authorized agent. The connection fired in his brain. The mysterious consultant who had hidden behind a screen, the voice of pure logic that had dissected his company's failure. And the woman standing in the back of the room in a midnight blue suit were one and the same. What? He slowly took off his reading glasses. His hands, usually so steady, trembled slightly as he folded them and placed them in his breast pocket. He looked at me. The anger that had been directed at his son a moment ago vanished, replaced by a profound, terrifying clarity. It was the look of a man who realizes he has been standing in the presence of a master swordsman without knowing he was in a duel. The room held its collective breath. They expected him to scream. They expected him to call security. They expected him to defend his son against the accuser. Instead, Kenji Tanaka, the billionaire patriarch of one of Japan's oldest industrial families, pushed his chair back. He stepped away from the table. Moving with a solemn, heavy grace, he turned his body fully toward me. And then, he bowed. It was not a nod. It was not the polite, shallow incline of the head he had given me earlier. He bent at the waist, his back perfectly straight, lowering himself until his torso was parallel to the floor, a perfect 90-degree angle, the saikere, the deepest form of respect, reserved for the emperor, for the gods, or for someone to whom you owe an unpayable debt. He held the bow. 1 second, 2 seconds, 3 seconds. The silence in the penthouse was absolute. It was shattered only by the sound of a champagne glass slipping from the fingers of a socialite near the window and crashing onto the floor. No one moved to clean it up. They were too paralyzed by the sight of the great Kenji Tanaka humbling himself before the woman who, 5 minutes ago, had been the punchline of his son's joke. "Father," Brad whispered from the floor, his voice trembling with confusion. What are you doing? She is just—" "Mister?" Tanaka straightened up slowly. He did not look at his son. He kept his eyes locked on mine. "I apologize, Mister," Tanaka said in English, his voice resonating with a quiet, iron authority. "I apologize for the disrespect shown to you under my name. I did not know that the surgeon I hired to save my life was also the guest at my table. You have performed your duty with honor. Stratton-san." Brad scrambled to his feet, his face a mask of panicked disbelief. "Hired dad? What are you talking about? She is a nobody. She is Chloe's broke sister." Silence. The word did not come from Mr. Tanaka. It came from Mrs. Tanaka. Emi Tanaka. The woman who had sat silently through the entire dinner. The woman who had been described by Brad as a traditional, passive decoration. Stepped forward. Her movements were swift and fluid, betraying the elegance of her training in traditional dance. She walked up to Brad. He towered over her. But at that moment, she looked 10 feet tall. She looked up at his face, the face she had washed when he was a baby, the face she had kissed when he graduated, and she saw nothing but a stranger. She raised her hand. Crack. The sound of the slap was louder than the breaking glass had been. It was a sharp, violent report that echoed off the vaulted ceilings. Brad's head snapped to the side. A bright red handprint blossomed instantly on his pale cheek. He stumbled back, clutching his face, his eyes wide with shock. "Mom." Mrs. Tanaka did not cry. Her eyes were dry and fierce. She spoke in Japanese, her voice low but vibrating with an intensity that made the hair on my arms stand up. I did not need to translate for the room to feel the heat of her words, but I knew exactly what she said. "You dare," she hissed in Japanese. "You dare use the language of your ancestors to insult a sensei. You use the tongue of poets and warriors to spit filth at a woman who possesses more honor in her little finger than you have in your entire body." She took a step closer to him, forcing him to retreat. "We sent you here to represent us," she continued, her voice rising. "We gave you our name, and you have dragged it through the mud. You are not a Tanaka. Tanaka protects the weak. Tanaka honors his guests. You are just a thief in a borrowed suit." Brad looked around the room, pleading with his eyes for someone, anyone, to help him, but the guests were shrinking away, terrified of the raw, primal justice being meted out before them. "Mister." Tanaka stepped forward to stand beside his wife. He looked at the dossier again, then at the terrified crowd. He adjusted his kimono, regaining his composure. He was no longer the father. He was the chairman. "Listen to me." "Mr. Tanaka announced in English, his voice booming, "and listen well, because I will only say this once." He pointed a finger at Brad. "As of this moment, Bradley Tanaka is relieved of all duties within Tanaka Heavy Industries and its subsidiaries. He is stripped of his title as director. He is stripped of his board seat." Brad let out a strangled sob. "Dad, you can't. The merger. The investors." "There is no merger, Mister," Tanaka said coldly, "and there are no investors. There are only victims, and I will spend the next year repaying every cent you stole from them." "Mister—" Tanaka paused, his gaze sweeping over the crowd of sycophants and parasites who had enabled Brad's behavior. "Furthermore," he continued, "let it be known that Bradley Tanaka has been removed from the family trust. He is disinherited. He will receive no allowance. He will receive no shares. He will receive nothing but the clothes on his back." "No," Brad screamed, dropping to his knees again. "You can't do this. I am your son. I am your only son." "My son died a long time ago." "Mister," Tanaka said, his voice cracking slightly with suppressed grief. The man kneeling before me is a stranger who learned to speak Japanese only to mock those he deemed beneath him. Brad looked at me, his eyes filled with hate. "This is your fault. You poisoned them, you witch." "Mr." Tanaka turned to me. He gestured with an open hand, a presentation of power. "From this moment forward, Mr." Tanaka declared, addressing the entire room, "Miss Linda Stratton holds the plenary power of attorney for all Tanaka family assets in North America. She acts with my voice. She acts with my authority." He looked at the bankers and lawyers in the crowd. "If you wish to do business with Tanaka Corp., you will speak to her. If you have a debt to settle, you will speak to her. And if any of you," his eyes narrowed, "if any of you dare to disrespect her or attempt to work with this man again, you will be declared an enemy of my family, and I promise you, we have a very long memory." The weight of the decree settled on the room. Linda Stratton, the girl in the hoodie, was now the gatekeeper to a multi-billion-dollar empire. I saw the faces of the guests shift. The sneers were gone, replaced by fear and calculation. They were already wondering how they could apologize to me. I did not care about them. I looked at Chloe. She was standing alone near the table, her hands trembling. She looked at Brad, kneeling on the floor, weeping over his lost fortune. He wasn't crying because he lost her. He was crying because he lost the credit card. She looked down at her hand, at the massive, gaudy diamond ring that Brad had bought probably with stolen company funds. She slowly pulled it off her finger. She walked over to him. Brad looked up, hope flickering in his eyes. "Chloe, baby, you can fix this. Talk to them. Tell them we are in love. Tell them." Chloe looked at him with a sadness that was far more devastating than anger. "You never loved me," she said, her voice steady. "You just loved that I was easy. You thought I was stupid." No, that was just talk," Brad stammered. "I didn't mean it." "You meant every word," Chloe said. "And you were right about one thing. It was easy. I was easy to fool because I wanted to be loved. But I am not stupid." She dropped the ring. It hit his chest, bounced off his silk tie, and clattered onto the floor next to the broken glass. "I am a Stratton," she said, "and we do not marry cowards." She turned her back on him and ran to me. I opened my arms, and she collapsed into me, burying her face in the shoulder of my suit. I held her tight, feeling her shake. I stroked her hair, glaring over her head at the man who had tried to break her. "Get him out of here," I said. I did not shout. I did not scream. I spoke with the quiet authority of someone who owns the room. Two men stepped out from the shadows near the elevator. They were not hotel security. They were Vargas's men, whom I had positioned there an hour ago. They were large, professional, and moved with the efficiency of machines. They grabbed Brad by the arms. "Get off me," Brad shrieked, kicking his legs. "This is my house. You can't throw me out of my own house." "Actually," I said, cutting through his screams, "the lease for this penthouse is held by Apex Strategy LLC, the shell company you used to embezzle funds. Since I have seized all assets associated with that entity to repay the company, this apartment now belongs to Tanaka Industries, and as the acting representative, I am evicting you." Brad's eyes bulged. You planned this. You planned everything." "Every second of it," I confirmed. "Goodbye, Brad." The guards hoisted him up, his feet dragged across the marble floor, squeaking against the polished stone. He was blubbering now, a mess of snot and tears, begging his father to look at him. "Dad, Mom, please, I'll be good. I'll change. Don't let them take me." "Mr." Tanaka turned his back. He stared out the window at the New York skyline, his shoulders hunched in grief. "Mrs." Tanaka closed her eyes, a single tear finally escaping down her cheek, but she did not move to stop them. The elevator doors opened. The guards threw Brad inside. He tried to lunge out, but one of them pushed him back with a firm hand to the chest. "Don't come back," the guard said. The doors slid shut, cutting off his screams. The silence that followed was heavy, but it was clean. The toxin had been removed. "Mr." Tanaka turned around. He looked at the room of stunned guests. "This party is over," he said wearily. "Please leave, now." It was a stampede. The socialites and businessmen couldn't get to the exits fast enough. They grabbed their coats and purses, avoiding eye contact with me, avoiding eye contact with the grieving parents. Within 3 minutes, the penthouse was empty, save for the staff, the Tanakas, Chloe, and me. Chloe pulled back from my embrace, wiping her eyes. She looked at me, really looked at me. "You speak Japanese?" she asked, a small, watery smile touching her lips. "I do," I said, brushing a tear from her cheek. "I have for a long time." "And you are a crisis negotiator?" she asked, glancing at the dossier. "Something like that," I admitted. "I fix broken things, and I stop bad people." She laughed, a short hysterical sound. "You were never the loser sister. Were you were just protecting me." "I tried," I said. "I am sorry I had to do it this way. I am sorry it hurt." "It hurts," she admitted. "But seeing him on the floor, seeing him for what he really was, it hurts less than marrying him would have." She hugged me again, tighter this time. "Mr. and Mrs. Tanaka walked over to us. Mr. Tanaka looked older than he had an hour ago. The fire of the confrontation had burned down to embers of exhaustion. He reached out and took my hand. He did not shake it. He held it with both of his, bowing his head slightly over it. "Thank you," he said. "You saved my company, but more importantly, you saved us from living a lie. We have lost a son tonight, but I believe we have found a daughter." He looked at Chloe. "Stratton-san," he said to Chloe, "I am deeply sorry for the pain my family has caused you. If there is anything you need, anything at all, you only have to ask." Chloe sniffled and stood up straight. She looked at the billionaire, then at his wife. "I just want to go home," she said. "I want to go home with my sister." "Of course," Mrs. Tanaka said gently. "My driver is downstairs. He will take you anywhere you wish." I nodded. I gathered my leather portfolio. I adjusted my suit jacket. "We have a lot of work to do tomorrow. Tanaka-san," I said to the chairman. "The audit is only beginning. We need to recover the assets, restructure the board, and issue a press release before the markets open in Tokyo." "Mr." Tanaka smiled a sad, tired smile. "Tomorrow, Sensei. Tomorrow we work. Tonight we mourn the living." I put my arm around Chloe. We walked toward the elevator, leaving the empty, silent penthouse behind us. The chandeliers still sparkled. Reflecting off the spilled champagne and broken glass on the floor, the wreckage of a fake life, finally swept away by the truth. It has been 30 days since the night the chandeliers shook in the penthouse. 30 days can change the shape of a life entirely, for the city of New York. It is just a blink of an eye, a shifting of the seasons from the biting cold of late winter to the tentative, hopeful green of early spring. But for the people who were in that room, the world has tilted on its axis. I sat on a bench in Washington Square Park, watching the pigeons fight over a discarded pretzel. I was back in my uniform jeans, sneakers, and a hoodie that was soft from 100 washes. To the students rushing to class and the tourists snapping photos of the arch, I was nobody. I was just part of the scenery, as innocuous as a fire hydrant. But on the screen of my phone, a news alert flashed. Former Tanaka executive denied bail in multi-million-dollar embezzlement case. Brad Tanaka was currently residing in a federal detention center in Lower Manhattan. The forensic audit I had handed to his father had been thorough. It detailed every wire transfer, every forged invoice, and every violation of the Securities Exchange Act. The prosecutors were calling it a slam dunk. Brad was facing 10 to 15 years in a federal prison. I heard from Julian, my lawyer, that Brad had tried to call Chloe from jail. He had used his one phone call to beg her to sell her grandmother's jewelry to pay for his legal defense. She did not accept the call. I smiled, taking a sip of my coffee. The coffee was from a new place, a small, dusty storefront in the West Village that smelled of vanilla beans, yeast, and cinnamon. Earlier that morning, I had stopped by to see the owner. Chloe was standing on a ladder, painting the sign above the door. It read, "The Kneaded Dough." She had paint in her hair and flour on her cheek. She looked tired. Her muscles ached, and she was worried about the permit inspection next Tuesday. But she looked alive. "Hey," she had called down to me, waving a paintbrush. "What do you think? Is the font too big?" "It is perfect," I had told her. She climbed down and wiped her hands on her apron. The massive diamond ring was gone, replaced by a simple silver band she had bought for herself at a flea market. She had used the inheritance, the money Brad had tried so desperately to steal, to put a down payment on this space. It was her dream. It was honest work. It was something she could touch and smell and taste. "I have a meeting with the flour supplier in an hour," she said, checking her watch. "I am terrified. Linda, what if I can't negotiate a good price?" "You will be fine," I said, handing her a coffee. "Just remember, you are the one with the money. That means you are the one with the power. Walk away if you don't like the number." She grinned. "You are teaching me your scary ways, aren't you?" "Just the basics," I winked. I left her there, surrounded by the chaos of construction, humming a song to herself. She was not the puppet Brad had described. She was a woman building a kingdom of her own, one croissant at a time. My phone buzzed again. It was time. I walked a few blocks to a private Japanese garden tucked away behind a high stone wall on the Upper East Side. It was a sanctuary of silence in the middle of the screaming city. Mr. and Mrs. Tanaka were waiting for me in the tea house. They looked different. The strain that had etched deep lines into their faces a month ago had softened. They still carried the grief of losing a son not to death. But to disgrace yet, there was a lightness about them now. The rot had been cut out. The healing had begun. "Stratton-san," Mr. Tanaka said, standing as I entered. He bowed. It was a bow of equals now. "Tanaka-san," I replied, bowing back. We sat on the tatami mats. The tea master prepared the matcha, the whisk moving in a blur of bamboo. We drank in silence for a long time, listening to the water trickling into the stone basin outside. "The stock price has stabilized," Mr. Tanaka said quietly. "The restructuring plan you implemented is working. The shareholders are calm. You have done the impossible." "I just balanced the equation," I said. "The company was strong. It was only the leadership that was weak." Mrs. Tanaka set her cup down. She looked at me with eyes that were sharp and kind. "You speak our language with the soul of a poet," she said. "But you are an American. You have lived a life of secrets. Why? Why did you learn to speak like us? Why did you learn to respect the silence?" I looked down at the green foam in my cup. It was a question I rarely answered. "When I was 19, I began, my voice soft. "I was a student in Kyoto. I had a scholarship for tuition, but I had no money for food or rent. I was starving. I was sleeping in a manga cafe." I looked up at them. "A family found me, the Satos. They ran a small noodle shop near the university. They were not rich. They worked 16 hours a day, but they took me in. They gave me a room above the shop. They fed me. They taught me how to wear a kimono. They taught me the tea ceremony." I paused, the memory washing over me. Mr. Sato told me something I will never forget. He said that money screams, but wealth whispers. He said that a true master does not need to shout to be heard. He taught me that humility is not weakness. It is the control of power. He taught me that to serve others is the highest honor. I took a deep breath. Brad, he had everything. He had the money, the pedigree, the education, but he had none of the spirit. He used the culture as a costume to belittle people. He mocked the very values that saved my life when I was a teenager. When I heard him speak to you that night, when I heard him use your language to hurt my sister, it was not just personal, it was an insult to the memory of the people who raised me. Mrs. Tanaka reached across the table and placed her hand on mine. Her skin was cool and dry. "The Satos," she whispered. "They raised a tiger." Mr. Tanaka cleared his throat. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a thick envelope. Linda, he said, using my first name for the first time. I am returning to Tokyo tomorrow. The board has voted. We want you to come with us. He slid the envelope across the table. This is an offer for the position of Vice President of Global Strategy. You would answer only to me. You would have a staff of 50. You would live in Aoyama. The salary is substantial. It is more than you make as the auditor. I looked at the envelope. It was everything a person in my field could want. Legitimacy, prestige, immense wealth, a life in the country that I loved. I touched the paper, feeling the texture of the expensive stationery. Then, I slowly slid it back across the table. I am honored, Tanaka-san, I said. Truly, but I cannot accept it. Mister. Tanaka did not look surprised. May I ask why? Because my work here is not done, I said. My sister is just starting her life. She needs me, not to fight her battles for her. She is learning to do that herself, but to be there when she succeeds. I spent so long living in the shadows, protecting her from the dark. Now, I want to watch her walk in the sun. I smiled. And besides, I added, if I took a corporate job, I would have to wear a suit every day. I really prefer my hoodie. Mister. Tanaka threw his head back and laughed. It was a genuine, belly-shaking laugh that startled the birds in the garden. You are a strange woman. Linda Stratton, he said, wiping his eyes. Very well. We will keep the position open. If you ever change your mind, the door to the Tanaka house is always open to you. And to Chloe, Mrs. Tanaka added. And to Chloe, I agreed. We said our goodbyes at the gate. There were no grand speeches, just a deep bow, a shared look of understanding, and the quiet knowledge that a debt had been paid. I walked out of the garden and back into the noise of the city. The taxis honked, the subway rumbled beneath the pavement, and the endless stream of humanity flowed around me. I pulled my hood up. To the people passing by, I was just another face in the crowd. I was not the woman who had brought down a tycoon. I was not the woman who controlled the fate of a multinational corporation. I was just Linda. And that was exactly enough. I turned the corner, heading toward the West Village. I was going to buy a croissant. I was going to pay full price. And I was going to tell the owner that she was the strongest person I knew. Brad Tanaka had learned his lesson too late. He thought power was about noise. He thought it was about shouting, about demanding, about humiliation. He thought the person with the loudest voice and the most expensive suit was the winner. But as I merged into the shadows of the street, I knew the truth. Sometimes, the sharpest weapon is not a blade, but the silence of someone who knows exactly who they are. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I hope you enjoyed the journey of Linda and her revenge against the arrogant Brad. Please let me know in the comments section below where you are listening to this story from. I would love to hear from all of you and know how far this story has traveled. And if you enjoyed this drama, please invite your friends to subscribe to the channel Family Revenge Stories. Don't forget to like the video and smash that hype button to help this story get recommended to more people. Your support means the world to us and helps us create more exciting stories for you. See you in the next video.